Okay, so, the JRPG as we know it today spawned from the mind of Yuji Horii in the late 80s. Up until that point, the RPG genre was largely Western and home computer dominated. Horii wanted to bring the genre to the wider Japanese audience, and to do that he knew he needed to bring it to consoles. However, this posed a problem. PCs had keyboards. The Famicom had a D-pad and 2 buttons. Additionally, he thought the deeply statistical nature of most PC RPGs would be off-putting to a console audience, which was more accustomed to things like, say, Mario Bros. Therefore, he decided his RPG would need to be simpler. Thus, he began work on his vision of what an RPG could be, and in 1986, Dragon Quest hit the Famicom, and with it the JRPG was born. This is an important point to understand, that the fundamental founding mechanical principle of the JRPG is simplification. If you've ever played D&D, particularly an older edition of D&D, you know how granular these systems can get, and that's where Western RPGs spawned from. JRPGs then are a movement in the opposite direction, streamlining the mechanical experience to create space for things like, say, a story. But we're not here to talk about Dragon Quest. No, we're here to talk about its rival, and one installment of its rival in particular. Whereas the original Dragon Quest only had you controlling one hero, Final Fantasy has always been about parties. The original Final Fantasy allowed you to select 4 characters from a set of 6, each with a different job. White Mage uses healing spells, Fighter is your basic damage dealer, etc. This is the founding principle of the franchise, the party. The series continued to experiment from there. In Final Fantasy IV, for example, the party is made up of a wide cast of characters with set jobs, but this allowed that game to go deeper into their characterization, tying their jobs to who they were as people. It was a sacrifice of customization for the sake of story. Final Fantasy V, however, sought to be the best of both worlds. Distinct characters who could also be customized mechanically. But how do you do that and follow the tenet of simplicity? See, when you take away from a system, when you cut it down to its core, then innovating from there becomes challenging. How do you build upon simplicity without just becoming complicated again? Well, you create something like the job system. Here's how it works. At the beginning of the game, your 4 party members all start with the same job, Freelancer. However, as you progress through the story, you begin to unlock new jobs. Any of your characters can switch to any job you've unlocked at any time, meaning they can fulfill whatever role you need them to. There are 22 jobs available in the original version of the game, so the selection is quite broad. And in addition to regular XP, characters also earn a separate form of experience, AP, which levels up jobs, granting new abilities and actions. But here's the point where the system crosses over from being good into being great. Abilities earned on one job can be equipped on another. For example, if your character has 4 levels in Monk, they earn Counter as an equipable ability. Counter gives a 50% chance to counterattack when attacked physically. Meanwhile, the Knight job has an ability called Cover, which lets them take hits for allies with low health. Therefore, if you equip a Knight with Counter, they'll take hits for their allies, and then strike back. With a little creativity, this system lets you create combinations that feel broken. It can feel like you're outsmarting the game. But, and this is critical, the system is limited. Most jobs can only equip 1 extra ability, so even though the potential for customization is quite broad, you're still limited in your choices, and thus the simplicity. And you can see how this system accomplishes a lot with a little. It allows for incredibly deep party customization without the need for skill trees or allocating points. By distilling complicated systems into just jobs and abilities, it simplifies party customization without losing its depth, and that feels like a miracle. And then of course there's the final twist. That starting job, Freelancer? The entire time you've been leveling up all these new jobs, it's been gaining their stats and passive abilities, and it has 2 equip slots. By the end of the game, it's probably the most powerful job you have. And so Final Fantasy V's job system almost feels too perfect. It's mind-boggling that something like this came out in 1992, and it's equally mind-boggling that it never came back. Most Final Fantasies after 5 went back to 4's setup, large cast, fixed jobs. Sure, they allowed customization in other ways, but never with quite the same amount of freedom. Even when the job system made brief returns, it was never quite the same. The closest was Final Fantasy Tactics, which used something akin to a job tree. And that's probably fine. See, Final Fantasy is a shockingly innovative franchise. Back in the day, the developers were constantly looking for new systems, new ways to push the mechanical boundaries. They simply moved on. And funnily enough, another game has recently picked up its torch. Metaphor ReFantazio uses a very similar system for its archetypes. But part of me also wishes they'd continue to iterate on this concept because it's the kind of system that gets me excited to talk about it, and it probably could have become a mainstay of the genre. Ah well, too late for that. Anyway, go play Final Fantasy V, there's an evil tree that needs chopping down.